Hello, everyone. I'm back. It has been a morning, y'all. Welcome back to our third session of today's Training Industry Learning Tech Showcase, Emerging Technologies, sponsored by Camtasia, ComLab India, DID, ELB Learning, and Imparta. So I'm Liz Spate, the Events Marketing Specialist here at Training Industry, and I'm thrilled to have you with us here today. Again, before we get started, I would like to quickly go over a few housekeeping items to help you interact with our speaker and get the most out of today's program. So again, continue to use that chat window for any comments and questions. We will be addressing questions throughout this session, as well as some dedicated time at the end. But if we do not get to all of your questions, because there were so many in the first session, keep that energy coming, but we might not have time. So do not worry, the Imparta team will be reaching out to you with all of those answers. And additionally, once the session ends, a brief survey will appear in your browser. Please take a moment to share your feedback on the session and the speaker. And all of our sessions are being recorded and archived on trainingindustry.com, and you will receive a follow-up email from us that will include a link to the on-demand program for you to share with your team. Now, if this is your first event with us, we would love to welcome you. We exist to make connections among learning and development professionals, and we offer tons of resources to support your role in L&D, like today's showcase, as well as through articles on our website, our magazine, conferences, research reports, and our podcast. We would also love to hear about what you've learned from today's session on social media, so please follow us on your favorite platform so we can continue the conversation. Without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our third speaker today. We have Richard Barkey, the founder and CEO of Imparta. So with that, Richard, take it away.
Thank you very much, Liz. And hello to everybody. Thank you very much for joining. So my name is Richard Barkey. I'm the founder and CEO of Imparta, as Liz said. We're a global sales performance and enablement company. We've been in the sales training business for a very long time, 30 years now. And obviously, over the last few years, like many of my colleagues, we've been pivoting very much to how AI can achieve what we've been sort of focused on all this time, which is taking learning, making it work, but driving it into application. So I'm going to begin by talking about some of the issues that we see okay, we hoped that that would remember the area of the screen that I was trying to share, but I will instead do it this way. There we go. So yeah, I'm going to just focus on three problems initially that I see in AI in sales training and enablement, because obviously AI is absolutely everywhere, but it kind of works to a greater or lesser extent. So I think one of the first things that we see is that a lot of AI platforms don't have a methodology or a research base baked into them. So most what's called sales AI, and by the way, I do come at this from a sales specialism, although a lot of the things we'll talk about apply in many different domains as well. But most what's called sales AI is basically created by technology platforms who don't understand the nuances of how buyers behave and how sellers change their behavior or don't. And is very much a kind of a vanilla LLM wrapped in some kind of platform. So it doesn't understand selling. And if you assess the output against the research around selling, it's actually pretty bad. So that's one of the big issues that we see with role plays, with assessments, that without the methodology, they become a little bit shallow. The second is that when most AI coaching is described, it's actually not really coaching, it's feedback. And there is a big difference. There are different modes of coaching, obviously, but there is a big difference between what is giving feedback and what is generally empowering coaching, and what I call pull versus push. So the default behavior of LLMs is to tell you stuff, to give you a list of 10 things you might try in a situation. And the default behavior of a lot of platforms is to tell you what you've done wrong and how to improve. That actually creates something called cognitive offloading that we're starting to see a lot of research around, that makes people lazy. Good coaching helps them to think problems through for themselves and is empowering in the way that a good coach is. So using models like the Grow framework that get people to think for themselves rather than making them lazy. And then the third problem is a problem of orchestration. So if you look at a lot of platforms that have AI built in, the AI is fragmented. It's fragmented in the sense of there's a button to do a role play, there's a button to get coaching, There's a button for a call assessment. And those things are not joined up. But in reality, as you'll see in a second, we believe that you really have to have a continuous process that joins up learning and assessment and performance. So there's no point having a call intelligence platform that tells you what you've done wrong if that doesn't link to the remediation, to the training that will help you to fix that, for example. So those are the three things that we see. There are more, but those are the three big ones that we see. And essentially, there are two parts to the solution that we have for that. The first is what we call the science of sales performance. So over the last 30 years, we've done a huge amount of research that covers and has created a body of work that covers over 200 sales management, sales leadership, customer experience skills, and there are some kind of overall areas listed here. We've trained hundreds of thousands of people in that time, but we've done deep research into at least 4,500 sellers across 25 years, with 4 books published on sales performance. And we keep that up to date. So we have an ongoing research program. We're able to ingest people's own methodology if you have an existing one, and often plug the gaps that that doesn't cover. So, for example, around design thinking or customer experience or retention. So having the science of sales performance embedded in the AI, both as RAG inputs, but also in the way that we design the agents, is super important. And without the system, though, that just sits there. We obviously can still do face-to-face training and virtual training, which we do, but AI gives us a fantastic way to deliver all of that capability. And I'd like to suggest that we need to think about learning and performance as this kind of continuous infinite loop. And this loop can start anywhere, but in the demo I'll show you, we'll start at the prepare stage. So we're kind of going, I'm thinking about getting ready for a customer interaction, and what is it that I need to do beforehand to get myself ready? And that's not just about doing research, it might be about role playing, practicing, and so on. Then I have that customer interaction, I do whatever it is, write an email or have the call. And then afterwards, I reflect on how it went and I assess how well I did. Now, that assessment, going back to the methodology point, needs to be aware of what's actually going on at the customer's point of view. So if the customer is in a different stage of the buying cycle, you will require different skills to move them forward. So the assessment has to first go, what's going on in this call before I even bring out the competency models to go, how did I do? Then from assess, we go to improve, where the learner or the seller or the manager or whoever goes, okay, there's a few gaps here. And it's this continuous tracking of where the performance gaps are and linking that to learning that's so, so powerful. So I might improve through e-learning, through adaptive learning in the AI, through role plays, even through activities outside the computer, talking to peers. Heaven forbid. And after that, then we go through and there's a following through on the learning and following through on any actions that are required after that performance cycle. Now, if you think about the current technology stack, and by the way, we sit on top of things like Gong and Salesforce, but a lot of those tools are very fragmented around the stack. So in Prepare, you might have, some Copilot tools that people use. In Assess, you've got conversation intelligence like Gong, but they're not connected up. So what we have is the ability to orchestrate over 30 agents now in a single conversation, but more on that in a second. Those agents include, at the prepare stage, things like coaching agents, deal planning agents, realistic simulation agents, in the moment guidance at critical points when you're doing an activity. In Assess, we have a very wide range of assessment tools, interviews, role plays, call assessment, email assessment, and so on, that are aligned to competencies that we can tailor for a particular organization. Improve, we have the ability to generate, admin set and adaptive learning plans, and use role plays and adaptive learning that tracks exactly where the user is right now and uses the next best learning intervention to move them to full competency. And then in follow through, it takes us around and we have agents, I'll come back to that one, that create coaching contracts, that drive next actions, that follow up. and that can generate content that's aligned with sales best practice, which most AI content isn't, and nudge people. The little arrow that flipped out on the left-hand side there is that a lot of this stuff happens sort of automatically within the AI system, but there is the ability for the telemetry from that system, the data, to identify patterns inside your sales team. So you might go, look, there's 30 people in Asia Pac who all need help with pitching, or across the board, there's an issue emerging with a particular competitor. So we can track those and use them to spin off instructor-led training, virtual or even face-to-face, that actually helps to really deep dive onto some of those issues and get the kind of personal connections going. So those are the two elements, really: the science of sales performance and buyer behavior, and the system to make it stick. And again, what I'm seeing with a lot of organizations is that you've got hundreds of AI tools. It's the orchestration of those that's really key. So we can provide a platform that sits in many places inside the stack, but we also are MCP, and if you're familiar with the technology, A to UI compliant. So A to UI is agent to UI, and it allows an agent to write its interface to an overarching user interface that it doesn't own. So basically, you can orchestrate our agents, as well as using us directly. You can orchestrate our agents through an MCP server, so that the seller has a single point of entry that they go to for all of your AI, and that can orchestrate Imparta's agents or Seismic or somebody else's in the right way.
And there was a great question about that. Adam had asked, are the agents built as needed from different providers?
So the way that would typically work is the orchestrator has an intelligence layer built into it that would understand this flow. And we do orchestrate our own agents as well, obviously. And that would then decide, are you looking for a piece of collateral to include in this particular pitch, for example, in which case it might call a seismic agent, or do you want to pull out from the big data graph that Gong has information about a particular account, in which case it might call a Gong agent. But if you want coaching or a role play that's linked to methodology, then it might call one of ours. So the orchestrator chooses the right task for the job, but also starts to kind of nudge people around this cycle. So it's not just doing one thing and then stopping. So our solution, the system, is called iCoach AI, and really there are kind of two modes of operation that I'll show you in a second. So the first is iCoach does orchestrate conversations that follow that loop. So when you finish doing an assessment, it will suggest some ways that you might do some learning. When you've done the learning, it'll suggest and ask you questions about how you might apply that to an account. And by the way, it's worth saying with that loop that if you're L&D, for example, you can start the loop anywhere you like. So you could start with assess and run a full-scale assessment of skills across the whole team, and that will then drive improvement. But the system will then pick that up and flow people through to application without you having to, have an army of admins making sure that happens. So that's the conversation orchestrated around the loop, which you'll see in a second. But we can also open what we call canvases that the AI works on with the user. And in this case, the example here is a learning canvas. But these are like work objects that you open up. So an account, a deal, a piece of learning, or even a goal that you're working on. And then the AI works on those work objects with you, but within the same conversation. So you're not clicking a button to do something different. You're clicking a button to change the focus. So with that said, I'm going to drop out of the slides and just show you this for real. So here we are in iCoach AI. Again, this is the just the browser version, but we sit inside Teams and WebEx and Dynamics and Salesforce and so on and so on. I'm zoomed in a bit, so hopefully you can read that. And what you can see here is the AI is aware of what I've done. So it would have sent me an email perhaps saying, hey, we should catch up on these issues. But when I start a new conversation, it will come back to me and say things like, you've already made a start on an onboarding track. and what else would you like to work on? So I'm going to use natural voice mode here and just have a quick chat with it. Hi, I wonder if we could just have a quick chat about the Novatech opportunity, and perhaps you could tell me where you think we are with that and what I need to do next.
With pleasure. Let's zoom in on Novatech. From what we've discussed before, Claire's interested but sees sales training as after the Beta Corp merger, so the opportunity is stalled. The big lever is reframing it as a risk mitigation and revenue enabler for the merger itself, not a nice to have afterwards. You also still need to reschedule the follow-up you missed.
So I'm just gonna switch the audio off. We got audio mode. You can use video, avatars as well here. But for now, I'll talk to it, but I'll have the text coming out so we don't spend time listening. So what's going on here is I've been talking in the past about a particular opportunity which is stalled. It's a sales training opportunity with a company called Novatech, and it's stalled because they don't see it as urgent enough right now. So she's kind of starting to coach me a bit on this. And I'm just going to go in and see if I can try a slightly different tag. Okay, so I'm a bit frustrated that this isn't seen as more urgent, but help me understand what I need to ask or do in this conversation I've got coming up to get Claire to see that this is not a nice to have, but is an urgent action she needs to take. So one of the key things to note here is that it's not just doing a data dump, it's actually making sure it has the right context before it gives me some ideas. So I've got about 15 minutes with her, I think, and this is booked as a kind of a follow-on conversation after the previous one. So maybe you could help me with some bullet point questions I might ask, and just a little bit of, help understanding what I need to do in this call. Yeah, I want her to agree that this is merger critical this year. Sorry, this is critical for the merger they've got this year, and just to agree to progress the conversation to the next stage. Okay, so it's in coaching mode, and just to show you that we can flip modes very quickly, let me try this. Just give me some theory on how we build momentum in a stalled account. So this is now dipping into the, oops, just turn off the voice mode there for a second. This is now dipping into the kind of research pool, 1.5 million words of research on buyer behavior, and it's kind of saying, make sure you reframe this as not just about training as a benefit, but as a risk if you don't. So from here, it's going to ask me which of these have I not tried, but I'm actually going to try something different, and let's do a little mini role play. I'd like to just try a tiny little role play with Claire before I have the call for real, um, where I practice that critical moment of explaining that she needs to think about what happens if we don't do this. So you can see there, I don't know if you saw as it popped up, it's actually going into a different agent. It's going into the role play agent now, which is bringing into the conversation to run the role play for me. And so now Claire is saying, I've only got about 15 minutes, but clear to hear what you're thinking. So Claire, I'm just curious to know from a personal point of view, which of your KPIs are at risk if you don't get the sales team to work in a new collaborative and consistent way across the two companies that you're merging right now. So it's asked, she's now saying, what are you seeing that makes me think my KPIs are actually at risk? And the key thing here is this is all rooted in the IP, right? This is rooted in the methodology rather than just being a generic role play around, for example, objection handling. So what happens if your, your top three performers were to leave because they feel unloved in this merger that's happening, whereas training might actually help them to feel part of the new system and they might stay? Okay, so you can see here that the role play is helping me to, to kind of work through some of the things I might say. And let's just ask for a quick bit of, feedback on that. So just give me a tiny bit of feedback on how that went and give me the top two things I might do better. So here it's now actually giving me a bit of an assessment of how that role play went, just focusing on the the key things that I should have been focused on in that call, and some of the key areas for improvement. And even after a really short role play, um, you can see that it's come up with some fairly sophisticated points about advancing the sale, exploring impact and urgency, and so on. So it's pulling those from an approved competency list for your organization that we can create and tailor, and giving you feedback. So now what I could do if I had that call is I could then bring in the call transcript and get a very similar but actually more detailed assessment of the call, based on how I've actually done. So it could do that on a role play. It can actually do that on a live call or even an email as well. And I mentioned these canvases earlier. So if I open up, for example, my profile, which is a canvas that includes what the AI has kind of stored about me, and it will say my private profile is building up nicely. It's using this information about me. So things like the Novatech goal here, my coaching preferences, my values and decision style, my strengths. It's using that to help tailor the feedback and to tailor any role plays. So if, for example, you want everybody to do a role play on a discovery call, you don't have to, as you do with many platforms, specify what the product or the market focus is manually. You can specify the skill area, the difficulty level, and then the system will automatically tailor that to what it knows about each person. And those canvases extend to goals. So here we have my goals, and one of them is unblocking the Novatech account. And really the goals are informed by the coaching that we do. So if I click on that, you can see, and I'm slightly zoomed in here, but you can see kind of the goal, the barriers to achieving that goal, the commitments I've made. And on the right-hand side, the AI is aware of what I'm looking at in the canvas, and it's giving me feedback. So imagine I've done that piece of assessment, and sorry, I've done the call and I've run the assessment. I've got this kind of feedback here, and then I'm into the improve stage of the cycle, and so I can go to my learning, which is here, and I have a set of learning journeys which I might be working on, and I can click on that. And I can see how I'm doing on a particular, say, an onboarding learning journey. But I can also use this to give me specific learning that will help me with any particular feedback out of that call that I had. So if I just do this, could you point me towards some e-learning, a learning module that would help me with this issue of building momentum that we talked about? So here it's referring me to some e-learning. And if I click on one of these, it will take me to our learning management system to actually run through that. It can also point to others. So for another client, we have this pointing to their onboarding process inside MindTickle, for example. So I could do this learning, and then I can come back and I could say, okay, just ask me one question to make sure I've really understood that. So it's asking me a situational question, not just a definitional question, to help make sure that I've understood that fully. And we can then actually work in a different way with the AI. And I'm going to stop in a second and ask for any questions. But the AI is able to not just do e-learning, and actually next month we're able to show the e-learning in the flow of this platform, as well as going off to a separate LMS. But it can do what we call adaptive learning, where it's tracking the knowledge, the skill, and the confidence that each person has around a particular topic, and choosing in an orchestrated way the next best piece of learning. Is it a micro role play if you're overconfident, or is it just a bit of micro learning if you know what you're doing, to help somebody move from where they are to a more capable place? So there's lots more to talk about, but I thought it would be worth just showing you some of that in the flow. The great thing is you can go anywhere with this, but it will also nudge you in the right direction. So Liz, any questions coming in?
Yeah, Elaine said, the closed loop idea of preparing, doing, assessing, and improving feels very transferable beyond sales. Is the platform to design to support other performance environments like consulting or client delivery, or is it primarily optimized around sales workflow?
That's a great.
Workflows.
That's a very topical question, actually. So, I mean, we have always been a sales and management and leadership training company. So, but we used to do things like strategy. My very first foray into the world of training was actually something called Strategy Copilot. We had that name back in 1997, believe it or not, which was to train McKinsey consultants on how to be a consultant. And so we do have the ability to work in different domains. And actually, you know, I think one of our next steps, once we've just launched this new version of our toolkit, but one of our next steps, we would love to find somebody to work with to kind of try it out in a different domain. So if you've got some IP that might be in project management or whatever, I believe the whole approach works in actually any role. And so I'd love to experiment outside the scope of what we know. Liz, you're on mute, I think. Sorry.
Thank you, my friend. There was another great question. I hope I'm saying it correctly, Rico. Are we able to upload/share marketing or sales collateral, links to videos, etc., that a sale professional could use in their efforts? And kind of adding even like more explaining, would the iCoach have the ability to recommend or share any of these materials so they don't have to look for them?
Yeah, so I mean, we can do that a couple of ways. We can basically so we can connect to a whole pile of different systems using MCP. So we'd need to set it up, but we could connect to a seismic instance, for example, and use that to pull out a piece of collateral. There is the potential for us to have our own kind of data store, but in most enterprises there will be an agentic system that has that information. So assuming the right connections are made, or we build a custom agent to pull out your stuff, then yes, the system can go, here's a case study that might work in this particular industry for this particular customer, and here's how I would talk about it as well. Right.
Perfect. Keep the great questions coming. I think we might have time for one or so, but additionally, a lot of people are kind of asking, like, what are the next steps? What would you recommend after today, learning about your tool? What would be the next steps?
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. So I just wanted to finish really, and we're happy to answer questions sort of offline. But we've done some research over 2 years with 350 people across 8 clients. that identified $143,000 of impact on average per person per year from using this, which is pretty cool. And there's some specific case study examples there. So we can do a couple of things. If you are in the market for some form of enablement that sits on top of the stack that you have already, there are 6 tests that we would recommend you include in your RFP assessment. So is it personalized? Is it proactive? Is it primed with methodology? Is it pull-based? Is it present in the workflow? And is it protected with all of the security and governance you'd expect? So if you would like a copy of the slides, I'll give you Adam Norton's email address in a moment for potential clients who are able to share those. And then probably the best next step is either talk to us or really with these things, it's often better to try it out. So we're offering a very focused pilot of what we call a performance sprint, where we take, let's say, 50 people for 3 months and we go, let's set it up, let's define some performance metrics, which we'll measure, and kind of do a bit of integration into your systems, maybe talk about some of your IP, and then just let people have a go. And if it works, fabulous. And if it doesn't, they will have certainly gained something. But we can do that for a relatively focused amount of money as well, for a pilot with a small group of people. So that link there, the QR code, links to my LinkedIn. And if I just pop to the next page as well, that's just a summary. That's my email address, richard.barkey@imparta.com. If you look me up, you find me on LinkedIn. And for slides, Adam, who's been chatting to you in the chat, is the person who can help with that.
Fabulous. I'll keep this on a screen for a little bit longer, but thank you so much, Richard, for this demo. I really appreciate it. Really great questions, and I appreciate your time here today.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Beautiful. So I am going to steal a screen. If you did not get Adam's email, no fret. We also will send out a PDF of the deck as well. So no worries there, but we will be taking another 15 to 14-minute break. Up next, we do have Rajesh for their session sponsored by ComLab India, AI in Action, scaling global compliance and sales training at scale and speed. So in just a moment, again, I'm going to end this session. You can join our next session by returning to the event lobby and going to the session tab. I hope you all stick around for our next session, which will begin shortly. See you guys there. Bye, everyone.